A young nurse saved a little baby from train accident unaware the mom is one of the richest women in the world. Nurse Clara was rushing to the hospital for her shift that morning, unaware of the tragedy that was awaiting her, an event that would change the course of her life forever. The train station was busy as usual, filled with the low hum of morning conversations, the rustling of newspapers, the clack of heels, and the distant echo of approaching trains. People moved with purpose. Some in suits, others in scrubs like her. Some were seated, hunched over phones or sipping coffee, while others moved in brisk strides across the platform. It was just another weekday morning in the city. That was when she saw it, a stroller moving slowly, too slowly to cause alarm, but just fast enough to raise a question in her mind. Clara paused mid-step, her gaze narrowing. The baby stroller was inching forward, rolling away from a distracted young mother fumbling with her purse and phone. At first, Clara thought the woman had noticed and would reach for it. But as the seconds passed, Clara's instincts stirred. The woman didn't see it. The stroller was getting closer to the edge of the platform, where the warning lines marked danger. Time dilated. Clara dropped her coffee without even realizing it. The paper cup tumbled to the ground, splashing onto the cold cement as her feet sprang into motion. The chaos of the morning fell silent in her ears. The world blurred except for the single image ahead of her, the stroller with the tiny baby inside, rolling toward the abyss. A distant horn cut through the noise. The train was coming. People on the platform started to react. Some gasped, others froze, a few screamed, but Clara was already running. Her nursing bag slammed against her side, and her heart thundered in her chest. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She just ran. The wheels of the stroller were now inches from the edge when Clara dove forward. Her body hit the ground hard, but her hands reached the stroller just in time. With every ounce of strength she had, she yanked it backward, her knees scraping the gravel as she slid to a halt. A second later, the train blasted past with a deafening roar. Wind and dust whipped around her. The platform shook. Metal shrieked. But the baby was safe. There was a stunned silence. Clara looked up into the wide, tear-filled eyes of the mother, now frozen in place, her mouth slightly open. Then she rushed forward and collapsed beside her child, grabbing the baby from the stroller and holding him tightly against her chest. The mother wept, her entire body trembling as she clutched her child like she would never let go again. Clara sat up, her breathing heavy but steady. She ignored the sting in her knees and the scratch on her elbow. Her only concern was the child. Gently, she placed 2 fingers against the baby's neck. Pulse steady, eyes alert but confused. Breathing normal. He was okay. He's fine, she said softly, offering a calm smile to the distraught mother. He's going to be okay. The woman nodded, unable to speak, still caught in the whirlwind of shock and overwhelming relief. People on the platform slowly began to move again, some clapping, others still staring in disbelief. But Clara didn't wait for applause. She rose quietly, adjusted her coat, picked up her bag, and turned to go. She had a shift to catch at the hospital, lives to care for, and this moment, was just something she believed anyone would have done. She vanished into the crowd like a ghost, leaving only the memory of a heroic blur. What Clara didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that the woman she had just saved was not just any mother. She was Isabella Langford. The Isabella Langford, CEO of Langford Global Technologies, innovator, billionaire, one of the most powerful women on the planet. Her face graced the covers of Forbes and Time. Her name opened doors in Silicon Valley and humanitarian circles alike. She commanded boardrooms and inspired global movements. Yet in that moment, on that platform, she had not been a mogul or a visionary. She had been a mother on the edge of unspeakable loss. And someone had saved her. Isabella held her baby tighter and looked around the platform, searching for the nurse, but she was gone. Not even a name. The moment would haunt her in a good way. It would move her in a way no board meeting or billion-dollar deal ever had. Back in the VIP train lounge, Isabella rocked her child and replayed the scene over and over in her mind. She could see the nurse's eyes, steady, focused, kind. She remembered the way she had assessed the baby without panic, how she had offered no demand for praise, how she had walked away as if it was nothing at all. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. By the time she reached her estate later that morning, she had made up her mind. She would find this woman, this Clara, and thank her. Not with just words, not with money, but with something that would reflect the magnitude of what had been done. A life had been saved. Her life had changed, and someone needed to be honored for that. Meanwhile, Clara arrived at St. Augustine's General Hospital, a few minutes late, still brushing dust from her coat. She didn't mention what had happened. She slid into her duties as though it had been an ordinary morning, charting patients, checking vitals, assisting with morning rounds. But something about her was quieter than usual. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, not out of fear but from a strange sense of stillness. For someone who had been through something so intense, she was remarkably composed. A fellow nurse, Jayla, noticed her limping slightly. "You all right?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "Yeah," Clara said with a small smile. "Tripped on the platform." "Nothing serious." Jayla nodded and moved on. That was Clara, unshakable. But her unshakable nature masked something deeper. Later, in the break room, Clara sat alone for a moment, sipping cold tea and staring out the window. The image of the baby's face stayed with her. The pure innocence, the near miss, the weight of what could have been. She didn't save the baby because she wanted to be a hero. She didn't act because she was brave. She acted because she couldn't not act. Because that was who she was, a nurse, a protector of life, whether in a hospital or on a train platform. Back at Isabella's estate, however, things were far from quiet. Security footage was pulled. The transit authority was contacted. Through camera angles and timestamps, Isabella's team narrowed down the possible hospitals where the nurse could have come from. Scrubs, badge, color coding. One by one, they called each nearby hospital, describing the woman in the footage, seeking someone who matched her description. It didn't take long. Clara Evans, nurse, age 27, graduate of a state medical college, employed full-time at St. Augustine's. No social media presence beyond a dormant profile. No desire for fame. Just work, dedication, and compassion. Isabella smiled when she heard the name. She would go herself. No cameras. No press. Just a mother who needed to look into the eyes of the woman who had saved her child and say, "Thank you." It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at St. Augustine's General Hospital. The usual chorus of beeping machines and soft-soled shoes against polished floors filled the hallways. Nurses hustled in and out of patient rooms with the precision of a well-rehearsed ballet. Amid it all, Clara Evans moved through the ward with her usual poise, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back into a bun, her name tag slightly tilted but visible. She had just checked on a post-op patient and was jotting notes in a chart when she heard someone clear their throats softly behind her. She turned around. A woman stood there, tall, elegant, with auburn hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Dressed in a simple beige coat and holding a baby boy snug against her chest in a designer sling, the woman seemed almost out of place in the sterile, practical world of the hospital. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice warm but controlled. "Are you Nurse Clara Evans?" Clara blinked. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The woman exhaled as if releasing a burden she'd been carrying all day. "I've been looking for you." Clara's brow furrowed. "Have we met?" The woman smiled, though her eyes glistened. "I'm Isabella Langford." Clara paused, the name floating somewhere in the back of her mind. It took a moment, but then the pieces clicked into place. The baby stroller, the edge of the platform, the rushing train, and the woman who had wept on the ground afterward, holding her baby like he was the whole world. Clara's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, yes," Isabella nodded gently. "That morning, at the station. You saved my son." The hallway seemed to grow quieter around them. Clara shook her head. "I just reacted. I'm glad he's okay." Isabella glanced down at the baby, who now cooed softly in his sling. "Thanks to you. He's more than okay. You gave me back my whole world that day. I've been searching for you ever since." Clara offered a faint smile, though her cheeks flushed with color. Compliments never sat comfortably with her. "I was just in the right place at the right time." But Isabella wasn't going to let it go so easily. "I don't think you understand," she said quietly. "I've faced hostile boardrooms, federal investigations, competitors trying to dismantle everything I've built, but nothing has ever brought me to my knees like watching that stroller roll away. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then there you were." Clara looked down at her shoes, her humility almost awkward now. "I'm just glad I saw him in time." Isabella smiled again, with more softness than Clara expected from someone so powerful. "Would you allow me to take you to dinner sometime? As a proper thank you?" Clara hesitated. She wasn't the kind to mingle with billionaires, nor was she comfortable with the idea of being rewarded for doing what felt like the obvious thing. And yet, something about Isabella's request felt sincere. Not grand, not flashy, just genuine. I don't know, Clara said carefully. I have a late shift most nights. I'll work around you, Isabella said. Anywhere, anytime, just one meal, one conversation. Clara sighed softly, then glanced at the baby, who giggled as if adding his own vote. All right, Clara said, but only if we keep it casual. Isabella's smile broadened. Deal. The restaurant was small, tucked between a bookstore and an old shoe repair shop on a quiet side street. Clara had chosen it deliberately. A place she went to sometimes after shifts when she needed peace, or when she could afford a real meal that wasn't vending machine soup or cold sandwiches. When Isabella arrived, the manager nearly dropped the wine list. Clara stood to greet her, feeling slightly underdressed in her navy cardigan and jeans. Isabella, to Clara's relief, had dressed down as well, black slacks and a blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just her and her son, who now snoozed in a car seat beside their table. I like this place, Isabella said, settling into her chair. It smells like rosemary and history. Clara smiled. They make the best lentil stew in the city. They placed their orders and, for a while, talked about safe topics, food, books, how babies somehow always know to cry the moment a parent sits down to rest. But eventually, the conversation drifted. You're different, Isabella said after a pause. Clara raised an eyebrow. Different how? You didn't flinch when I said my name. You didn't ask about my company, or my money, or even my house. Most people, they react. Clara stirred her tea. I know who you are. But none of that mattered when I saw your baby heading for the tracks. And it still doesn't matter to you now, does it? Clara met her gaze. No, it doesn't. I grew up in a world where titles didn't mean much. People either helped each other, or they didn't. That's all that counted. Isabella leaned back, studying her. Where did you grow up? Foster homes, mostly. Clara said, with no bitterness. Just truth. Moved around a lot. Never stayed in one place for long. But I met some incredible nurses along the way. One of them helped my foster sister survive a pretty bad pneumonia case. That's when I knew what I wanted to do. You became the person you needed, Isabella said softly. Clara looked down at her napkin. I try to be. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The candle on their table flickered. The baby shifted slightly in his sleep. Then Isabella said, You have no idea how rare people like you are. Clara looked up, surprised by the weight in Isabella's voice. I've sat across from presidents, Isabella continued, argued with prime ministers. I've launched satellites into orbit and helped fund clean water projects in 7 countries. But I can count on one hand the number of people I've met who didn't want anything from me. I'm not special, Clara said. You're exactly the kind of special this world forgets to see, Isabella replied. And I don't want to forget. Dinner ended quietly. No press showed up. No fancy dessert was sent to the table. Just 2 women, one life saved, and a connection formed in the silence between them. As they stepped outside, Isabella gently took Clara's hand. I know you didn't save him for thanks, she said, but I want to do something anyway. Something meaningful. Not charity. Not a reward. Something that matters to you. Clara shook her head with a faint laugh. I don't need anything. I know. But if you ever think of something, anything, I want to help. Clara paused, thinking. There's a free clinic near the South Docks. They're losing funding. They serve a lot of undocumented families, people with nowhere else to go. If you're serious. Isabella's expression didn't change. Done. Clara blinked. Just like that. I've made deals worth billions in under 10 minutes, Isabella said. This one's easy. They said their goodbyes on the sidewalk. Isabella got into her sleek black car with her baby and a smile, while Clara stood watching the taillights disappear into the night. She shook her head and chuckled under her breath. What a strange week this had been. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet dinner would be the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could imagine. The days that followed their unexpected dinner felt oddly different for Clara Evans. Her life hadn't changed in the obvious ways. She still clocked in at the hospital, still drank the same burnt coffee in the break room, still tucked her hair into a bun and checked patient charts, but something had shifted beneath the surface. Isabella Langford was no longer just a name she heard on news segments or saw on magazine covers and waiting room stacks. She was real now. Tangible. human, and surprisingly persistent. It started with small gestures. A thank you note delivered to the nurse's station, signed simply Isabella, with a donation slip attached for the hospital's pediatric wing. Then came the phone calls, never intrusive, just soft invitations. Would Clara consider joining her for a visit to a local shelter? How about a tour of a new women's health clinic Isabella was funding? Always phrased as an option, never an obligation. Clara tried to say no. At first. But curiosity, and maybe something deeper, kept getting the better of her. One Saturday morning, she found herself in the backseat of a sleek, silent electric SUV, heading across the city beside Isabella. They were en route to a food distribution center in the industrial district, where hundreds of volunteers were preparing weekly care packages. "I hope you don't mind," Isabella said, glancing at Clara. "I find these kinds of days more fulfilling than any board meeting." Clara smirked. "I've never been invited to a board meeting. You're not missing much. Less food. More ego." They spent the morning stacking canned goods, bagging rice, lifting boxes. Isabella worked as hard as everyone else, sweat on her brow, dirt on her sleeves, her designer shoes forgotten in favor of worn-out sneakers. She laughed with the volunteers, hugged grandmothers, and crouched down to listen to stories from children who'd learned too early what it meant to go hungry. Clara, watching from a few steps behind, found herself unsettled, not by the poverty, not even by the scale of need, but by how comfortable Isabella was here. Among people who had nothing, she wasn't playing a role. She was just being. That night, over takeout noodles eaten from paper cartons in Isabella's kitchen, Clara finally asked the question that had been brewing. "Why do you do all this?" Isabella didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "Because I can," she said simply. "Because I know what it's like to need something and be told you're not worth the help." Clara's eyes lifted. "You?" Isabella nodded. "Before the name. Before the billions. I was raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. Sometimes the lights didn't stay on. Sometimes dinner didn't happen. I remember what that feels like. And I promised myself that if I ever got out, I'd never forget." There was no drama in her voice. No performance. Just quiet conviction. Clara didn't respond. But something inside her shifted again. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. Clara joined Isabella at a school renovation project, sat in on a grant meeting for an addiction recovery center, and even helped pack first aid kits for disaster relief efforts. Isabella never treated Clara like a guest or a prop. She was a partner, asked for her opinions, trusted with decisions. And Clara began to open up. She told Isabella about the foster homes, about the little brother she lost touch with, about how nursing wasn't just a job. It was the one place she felt she had control, where she could ease suffering in a world that had once been cruel to her. They were different in almost every way. Clara lived in a one-bedroom walk-up and still juggled student loan payments. Isabella owned a penthouse, sat on the board of 4 Fortune 500 companies, and could wire $1 million while sipping tea. But beneath all the differences was a shared heartbeat. Both had seen the world's darker corners. And both had decided not to turn away. Then came the gala. Isabella had mentioned it casually. "No pressure," she said. "But if you'd like to see how the other side dresses up to give back, you might find it interesting." Clara had laughed. "I don't think I own anything gala-worthy." The next day, a package arrived at her apartment. A long, emerald green dress with a simple note, "For when you decide to say yes." Clara almost sent it back, but something inside her, curiosity, defiance, maybe even courage, said go. The gala was held at the Langford Foundation's downtown center, a glittering hall of glass and light. Clara stepped in, heels clicking nervously, and immediately fell out of place among the tuxedos and champagne flutes. But then she saw Isabella across the room. Wearing a black gown and no diamonds, Isabella caught her eye and smiled like they were just 2 friends meeting for coffee. She walked over and looped her arm through Clara's. "You look like you belong here." "I feel like an imposter," Clara whispered. "Everyone does," Isabella replied. "Even the ones with name tags and 5 houses." As the night went on, Clara was introduced to CEOs, politicians, and artists. She kept expecting someone to look down at her, to dismiss her as the token nurse. But no one did, because Isabella didn't let them. She introduced Clara not as a hero, or a guest, or a prop, but as someone she admired, someone she learned from. And slowly, Clara realized something remarkable. She wasn't just being included. She was being seen. Later that evening, standing by the balcony, Clara looked out over the city lights. Isabella joined her, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. "Did you survive?" she asked playfully. "Barely," Clara smirked. "But it was eye-opening." Isabella tilted her head. "In a good way?" "In a complicated way," Clara admitted. "I always thought wealth like this insulated people, made them forget the world outside. But you haven't forgotten." "I try not to," Isabella said. "And with you around, I doubt I ever could." They clinked glasses gently, the city humming below. In that moment, Clara realized something she hadn't dared admit. She liked being near Isabella. Not because of the wealth or the access, but because Isabella understood something deep inside her. And because, for the first time in a long while, Clara didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. They were from opposite ends of life's spectrum, but their bond was growing stronger every day. And neither of them wanted to let go. It was late afternoon when Isabella Langford invited Clara over to her private garden terrace. The skyline stretched in hazy golds and purples, and the sun dripped like melted honey over the buildings. Clara had just finished a double shift, her scrub swapped for a casual sundress Isabella had once teased her into buying. Still, the fatigue clung to her like a shadow. "Why do I feel like I'm walking into an ambush?" Clara joked, flopping down onto the cushioned seat opposite Isabella. Isabella chuckled softly, a glass of iced tea already in hand. "Because you are. But it's a gentle ambush." Clara raised an eyebrow. Isabella leaned forward, folding her hands, a rare seriousness settling over her features. "Clara, I've been thinking about something for a while now. Watching you, how you give your time, your energy, your heart, without asking for a single thing in return, it's made me realize something." Clara tilted her head, wary. "That I need more sleep?" "No," Isabella smiled, but her voice remained soft, almost reverent. "That people like you are the reason the world still has hope. And the world doesn't see you. It praises billionaires and celebrities, but not the nurse who saves a baby on a train platform, or the social worker who stays late for a child's court hearing, or the teacher who brings food from home for a student who keeps going hungry." Clara looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Praise always felt heavier than criticism. "I'm just doing my job." "No, Clara, you're doing more than that. And it's time someone honored that." Isabella stood up and walked toward the glass railing, motioning for Clara to join her. Below, the city pulsed in its evening rhythm, cars honking, lights flickering on, lives moving invisibly. "I want to start a foundation," Isabella said, her tone growing firmer. "One that uplifts and empowers people like you. Nurses, teachers, first responders, caregivers, anyone whose contributions go unnoticed because they're not loud about it. And I want to name it after you." Clara blinked. "After me?" "Yes. The Clara Evans Foundation." For a moment, Clara didn't speak. The words hung between them like a balloon floating too high to catch. Then she laughed, but it was a laugh laced with disbelief and panic. "That's insane. I'm not a saint or a genius or Clara," Isabella interrupted gently, placing a hand on her arm. "You saved my child. And not just that, you kept showing up. To the shelters, the clinics, the gala. You've shown me, time and again, what grace under pressure looks like. What compassion looks like. The world needs to see that." Clara stepped back, her hands in her hair. "I don't know if I can live up to that. What if I mess up? What if people think it's about ego?" Isabella looked at her with a patience only earned through years of power and practice. "Then let them think what they want. Because the people who will benefit from this won't care what your critics say. They'll care that someone finally saw them, that someone believed they mattered." Clara's breath hitched. She thought of her childhood, the silence in foster homes, the birthdays forgotten, the nurses who had once patched up her scraped knees and had shown her more kindness than any parent ever did. She thought of the baby she'd saved, the mother's trembling hands, the weight of a tiny body pulled back from the edge of death. She thought of all the unnoticed good in the world. "Is this really something people will care about?" she whispered. Isabella nodded. "With your name, your story, and the people you'll inspire, yes. They will care. And we'll give them a platform, resources, recognition. We'll fund scholarships for nurses, grants for community heroes. We'll highlight their stories. You'll be the face of it, not because of fame, but because you remind us of what it means to serve with heart." Clara swallowed hard. Her throat was thick with emotions she couldn't name: honor, fear, disbelief. A part of her wanted to run, but a louder part, the one forged in long shifts and lost causes, told her to stay. Finally, she met Isabella's eyes. Only if I'm not just the name. I want to be involved. I want to help run it. I want to make sure it doesn't turn into another fancy label. A slow, warm smile spread across Isabella's face. That's exactly why I picked you. In the weeks that followed, the Clara Evans Foundation took shape. Isabella brought in legal teams, branding experts, nonprofit strategists. But Clara was in every meeting, notebook in hand, asking questions, challenging assumptions. She insisted on direct outreach, on hearing from the very people they wanted to serve. She proposed a mobile clinic initiative and a grant program for caregivers suffering from burnout. She created a fellowship for underprivileged students pursuing careers in healthcare and education. Clara's face, humble but fierce, appeared on the launch materials, not airbrushed or staged, but in scrubs, sleeves rolled up, smile tired but genuine. The media picked up the story quickly. Mysterious nurse who saved baby is now face of global foundation. But Clara didn't care about the headlines. What mattered were the letters she started receiving, handwritten notes from teachers, EMTs, social workers. Thank you for seeing us. I didn't know people like us mattered until I heard your story. You reminded me why I started doing this work in the first place. The Foundation's gala was nothing like the first one Clara had attended. This time, the crowd wasn't made of elite socialites or distant billionaires. It was filled with janitors and midwives, guidance counselors, retired veterans, single mothers who'd worked 2 jobs for years. When Clara walked up to the podium that night, the room fell silent. I never thought my name would mean anything to anyone, she began. But it turns out, what we call things matters, because a name tells people where to look. And if putting my name on this foundation means the world starts looking at the people who've always been invisible, then I'm honored. Deeply honored. Applause thundered. In the corner of the room, Isabella watched quietly, her eyes glistening, not with pride, but with something more profound. She had built empires, but nothing had ever felt as meaningful as watching Clara take center stage. Not for herself, but for everyone she stood beside. Later that night, Clara found Isabella backstage. You know this doesn't make me a saint, right? Good, Isabella replied, wrapping her in a hug. I never wanted a saint. I just wanted the world to see what I saw from the very beginning. And for the first time, Clara believed it too. Cameras flashed like a thunderstorm the moment Clara stepped onto the stage. It had been just weeks since the Clara Evans Foundation had been announced, yet the world had already caught wind of the quiet nurse who pulled a baby from the jaws of tragedy and turned that moment into a movement. Headlines raced across the globe. Nurse turned global hero. Everyday angel launches humanitarian wave. The Clara effect. And suddenly, Clara's life was no longer just night shifts and steady heartbeats. It was reporters, interviews, studio lights, and press badges. A swarm of journalists waited at every event, eager to catch the reluctant hero in her scrubs or to pull a quote from the woman whose name was now a symbol for unsung service. But for Clara, the attention was dizzying. She fumbled through her first interviews, cheeks flushed, hands clenched under the table. I did what anyone would have done, she repeated more times than she could count. But the world didn't seem to believe her. They wanted a story, the story of a humble nurse whose simple act of bravery unlocked something much bigger. Thankfully, Isabella never left her side. Poised and composed, Isabella became Clara's quiet armor, whispering reminders before each spotlight moment. Be honest. Be you. That's all they want. She hired a media coach not to change Clara, but to help her breathe easier when the lights turned on. She rearranged events to give Clara room to breathe, and most importantly, made sure the Foundation's work always remained at the center of the story. Still, Clara never let go of who she was. She kept working part-time at the hospital, walking those familiar sterile halls in her creased white shoes and tying her hair back the same way she always had. Her co-workers treated her the same, though occasionally someone would ask for a selfie. But Clara never let the glitz rewrite her purpose. What began to change, however, was the world around her. Messages started flooding in, not from celebrities or elites, but from school nurses in rural towns, paramedics who'd never been thanked, single mothers who had watched her speech with tears in their eyes. People from South Africa to Saskatchewan wrote to say, "You reminded me I matter." One woman from Brazil wrote, "I was ready to quit social work. Then I saw your story." Clara read every letter, every email, astonished that her story, a story she never wanted told, was echoing in corners she never dreamed she could reach. But it wasn't until she attended the Foundation's first Impact event that the truth really hit her. The venue was modest, nothing like the glossy gala from weeks before. Folding chairs, coffee and paper cups, a small crowd of people whose lives had already been changed by the Foundation's programs. One woman stood up, an elementary school teacher from the Midwest, who had received a grant that allowed her to buy books and warm meals for her classroom. "I always felt invisible," the teacher said, voice trembling, "until I heard Clara's story. Now my students eat breakfast every morning because she reminded someone that people like us are worth investing in." Another speaker, a hospice nurse, had tears in his eyes. "When I saw the name Clara Evans Foundation on the check, I thought, someone like me did something right in the world." Clara sat quietly in the front row, her hands in her lap. Her throat burned. This wasn't about fame. It never had been. It was about people, millions of them, who finally saw themselves reflected in someone who hadn't asked to be seen. That night, as she stepped outside into the cool air, Clara looked up at the stars and whispered to herself, maybe this isn't just a story about saving a baby. Maybe this is about saving each other. And for the first time, she believed the world had truly noticed, not her, but what mattered most. The ballroom was bathed in golden light, chandeliers casting soft glows over round tables draped in white. Laughter mingled with string music. Clara stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she held the note cards she wouldn't use. It was the third annual gala of the Clara Evans Foundation. From the moment she stepped into that hospital years ago, Clara had never imagined this. The journey from anonymous nurse to global advocate had been anything but expected. And yet, as the velvet curtain lifted and she stepped onto the stage, none of it felt like a dream. It felt earned, not by ambition or fame, but by purpose. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Survivors, caregivers, educators, community leaders. Every person seated had been touched in some way by the work she and Isabella had done. Some were scholarship recipients. Others were healthcare workers now fully funded through new outreach programs. There were doctors from mobile clinics Clara had helped launch and women from shelters supported by grants. The room was a living map of compassion. She took a breath and began to speak. "When I pulled that stroller from the tracks, I wasn't thinking about foundations or the future. I was just a nurse on my way to work. But I've learned something since then. One moment, one instinct can echo further than we imagine. It can create change, not because we seek it, but because we choose it." Applause rose, but Clara's gaze lingered on one figure near the front. Isabella. Once a stranger with a stroller and a secret fortune, Isabella had become Clara's closest ally, mentor, and friend. Where Clara brought empathy, Isabella brought vision. And together, they had turned a chance encounter into a revolution of giving. Isabella beamed with pride, her expression soft but unmistakably proud. Their foundation had expanded into over a dozen countries. It funded emergency healthcare access for underserved areas, created training programs for nurses in rural communities, and launched education initiatives in war-torn regions. Each project bore Clara's imprint, not just her name, but her values. But despite all this, Clara had never changed. She still rotated hospital shifts. She still tied her hair the same way. She still spent quiet nights answering letters from people across the globe, not with pre-written statements, but with handwritten replies. Even as statues and scholarships rose in her honor, Clara kept her feet on the ground, her eyes on the people, not the praise. She didn't crave attention, she craved impact. In the months following the foundation's rise, Clara had turned down multiple book deals and appearances. But what she never turned down was the chance to listen, to show up, to advocate. One of her most passionate causes became nurse mental health support, a subject often ignored. "We care for everyone," she once said in a televised interview, "but rarely are we cared for. That has to change." And it did. As the evening drew to a close, Clara stepped down from the stage, greeted by handshakes, hugs, and grateful tears. She made her way to Isabella, who raised her glass and said softly, "You didn't just save a child that day. You saved the world from forgetting what kindness looks like." Clara smiled, eyes glistening. "We saved it together." Outside the venue, a small girl with curly hair tugged on Clara's dress. Her mother crouched beside her, whispering, "That's the lady who saved us. Remember?" Clara knelt. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Hope," the girl said. Clara smiled at the name, at the serendipity of it all. As they walked into the night, the city lights glowing around them, Clara realized that this legacy wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who believed that even the smallest act of good could change a life. Because that's where it all began, not with power, not with wealth, just with a nurse, a moment, and a choice. If you enjoyed this powerful and emotional story of Clara Evans, the humble nurse whose one act of bravery sparked a global wave of kindness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel when Clara saved baby Hope at the train station? What do you think of her unexpected friendship with Isabella Langford, one of the richest women in the world? How did the story speak to you as Clara went from everyday nurse to a global symbol of compassion? Drop a comment below telling us how you felt about the way the story unfolded and how it ended. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Also, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel and connect people from all around the world. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything.